I'm going to try something a little different for this video. Now, I have shared a lot of painting videos that are like 3 to 5 minutes that are sped up, and I've also shared one that was a real-time painting walkthrough, but I don't have a middle ground, so I thought I would try to get a middle ground. See if I can get something that's about 15 minutes that walks through my steps. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So starting with this one, I'm going to do a head and shoulders portrait. I start usually the freehand outline of the subject's face by roughing out the facial shape. And I do that trying not to do like a smooth circle. I try to push, sort of do lines with actual edges for the angles that I think the face's shape should take. And then usually I'll do a cross, a vertical line and a horizontal line, indicating approximately where I think the midpoint of the face is, where the nose and the middle of the mouth will sit, and also where approximately the eyes will be. It's not exact, and I do some adjustments on the fly as I go. You'll see in the painting that I have on screen here, I did actually take a paper towel and kind of erase the position of some of the features, kind of giving it a second try. That's the nice thing about oil paints, is everything will blend out. There's kind of a brown mark where the stuff I smudged out disappeared, but that's going to completely go away as I add new layers. So the base layer that I've got going is sort of like a dark brown. It's got some umber, some dark umber, some little burnt sienna, probably a little cadmium red, and some yellow ochre kind of mixed together. And I used linseed oil to thin it down a lot. That initial outline, when I kind of rough out the subject's features, that's a very, very thin paint. And I think this is counter to kind of expert advice. I'm not sure if that's a recommended way to go or not, but I like having the very thin paint that as I add more layers, it'll disappear. I find that to be useful. So once I've got that initial outline, again, I think I mentioned this already, this is just a head and shoulders portrait. I'll add a little bit of scenery in the background as well to make it a little more interesting, but I tried to use something that was not too complex for this, that way it wouldn't be too long. So now what I'm doing in this painting is starting to block in zones of color. That first kind of purplish hue that I added was sort of shadow side of the face and some other areas where there should be shadows. It's an ultramarine blue mixed a little bit with cadmium red. I think I added a little umber at the time too, not too much. I didn't want it to be too dark, but just sort of pulling on the levers of color to try to get something that looked a little more like shadows. And then I started, I made a little mix of, so two of the big levers that I pull on this are yellow ochre and cadmium red. Mixing those two things together in various degrees, adding other colors to touch it up and kind of shift the balance of the color. So I will do one that's a little heavier on the reds for the red zones that you see on this painting, and then one that's a little heavier on the yellow ochre side for that. And you can kind of push and pull the red and the yellow and the blue colors to simulate to some degree the shape and contours of the face. The lighter values are going to be closer to you, and then the recessed areas like the cheekbones, the parts that are kind of covered and shadowed are going to be darker or bluer, you can kind of play with those tones a little bit. If you do something that feels like it wasn't correct, you can always go back. You can either wipe it away with paper towel like I did earlier, or you can just paint over it. That's kind of one of the beauties of oil paint, is just how flexible it is, how forgiving it is of mistakes. So if you're going through here and you're just blocking in your colors and you feel like you made an error or something doesn't look right to you, you can fix it pretty easily usually. I sometimes lose track of the exact amount, but I've done about 162, I think, paintings now, maybe somewhere around there. And I have, out of all of those this past year, I have only had one, I think, no, that's not true. Maybe 2 or 3 that I had to completely scrap. I was not able to adjust it or fix it or do anything. I've had a few that I've had to make major changes to, and especially lately, for some reason, I've just had a couple that I had to walk away from and just come back and not take a complete wrecking ball to, but really make some big adjustments, and that's okay. You should allow yourself to do that if you want to do that. Ultimately, I think that the painting, if it is a hobby for you, the painting hobby should be fun. You should enjoy it. And, if something's not working, do what you feel like doing with it. So getting back to this painting specifically. So I'm continuing now. So we blocked in some of the major zones of color. I've got the darker areas in, and I've mentioned the colors that I use to adjust that. Now I'm coming in and I'm trying to touch off some light. And I've done that with a mix of colors. Usually that's titanium white, which I also use to adjust the color value of other mixes, but titanium white, and I think I mixed a little cadmium yellow in there probably too, maybe a little yellow ochre also. But so those lighter areas, I tried to touch off where the nose and the chin and forehead and cheekbone might be catching some light. So the next thing, you can see I'm starting to get into, I touched a little background and sort of started touching the hair. Now there's some more background going. So my approach to backgrounds is, I think, a little different than a lot of artists. I've seen a lot of portrait artists do, and I've mentioned this in other videos, they do the background first, and then they'll use the benefits of wet on wet painting to then put, shape the head into that. And so the background often comes first for a lot of people. But for me, I like to get the facial details and structure in first. Then as we get to the second half of the painting, then I start putting in some background touches. I don't finish out the hair or the clothes, though, until the background's done. And that is because I like to finalize the hair shape, and I like to let the strands of hair somewhat blend into the background. I think it gives a little depth maybe, and maybe a nice effect to how that goes. So the background that I'm doing here is not, it's, for me, someone who does really basic backgrounds usually, this is kind of a departure lately, especially over the last month or two, but it's not super complicated. I'm just trying to put some kind of perspective of some lighter, farther back stuff, maybe some trees or something. I think that's what I'm going for here. And then some that are a little closer, that are a little darker, and then the sky behind it. This is all mixes of ultramarine blue and a lot of titanium white for the sky. I think you can probably tell that I don't clean my brushes very often or very well, which is, I don't know I don't know if what professional artists might say about that. They might think that's kind of not a good look, but I kind of like it. I like the effect that it gives. I don't know. It's kind of fun for me. I like it, but it is a challenge when I'm trying to do something that I know needs to be very, very white, like the sky. So I end up with pretty dirty skies sometimes, and that's probably not great. I probably should clean my brush more in situations like that. So I end up later applying a lot more titanium white to try to get those clouds to look a little fluffier. I think in this painting I partially succeeded. So what I'm doing now in the painting is I'm going through and touching up some aspects of the face that I was not satisfied with. Now, I know some of them, I tend to get hung up sometimes on jawline, or sometimes I make it a little too distinct, whereas in a real person or a painting that looks right, it might not have like a dark line that's delineating the jawline. Sometimes it might if the lighting is appropriate for that, but sometimes I overwork that. So I think maybe that happened here in this painting. Fortunately, I did not obsess over it, so that was good. So now in the painting, yeah, you see I returned to it again, and some touch-ups on the nose as well. So I'm bouncing back and forth between the hair, adding detail to the hair, and kind of touching up some other features. You can see, I think, in the hair how what I talked about adding that additional detail to the hair and then kind of blending it into the background a little bit, leveraging the alla prima technique to let things kind of mix and kind of blend together. I am not super great at hair still. I've been trying to get better. I think a big weakness for me on actually a lot of aspects of oil painting comes from the fact that I drew with pencils for a couple years before I tried painting last year for the first time. So I'm used to, with pencils, the detail is the line. And, I'm obviously not a professional at any of this, but line drawing and having those lines mean a lot. But with painting, sometimes you don't need a line at all. And with hair, sometimes you're more concerned about like areas that are similar colors and similar contrasts. And that's a hard lesson still, even a year into this, to get used to, is, sometimes you don't need a discrete hair follicle. I also want to point out that now you can see in this painting, I am using a different brush. This is a very small brush now to kind of scrape in some details. That is, I try to work with bigger brushes first and then work my way down eventually as I get to the end, and only use those smaller detail brushes at the very end, because I find that that's a really effective, and it feels right with the bigger brushes, trying to do that for as long as I can possibly hold out. So that brings us to the end of this one. So we'll go ahead and let this wrap up, but I hope this was useful to someone, and I appreciate you watching. I'll see you for the next video.